6 surprising reasons visiting friends after retirement can make loneliness worse. Emotional wellness. Have you ever felt a wave of loneliness and thought, maybe visiting a friend will make it better? That's a natural feeling, especially after retirement. You go from years of structure, coworkers, constant calls and busy days, to quiet mornings and wide-open hours with too much space to think. In those still moments, we often reach for the past. We call old friends. We stop by someone's house. We hope familiar faces will fill the emptiness inside. But what if I told you that turning to friendship every time you feel lonely might actually make you feel even more alone? Strange, right? But it happens. Relying too much on others to ease your loneliness can backfire, hurting your heart, your relationships, even your sense of self. In this video, we'll explore 6 surprising reasons why visiting friends during emotionally vulnerable moments might do more harm than good. And more importantly, how to reconnect in healthier, more fulfilling ways. This isn't about cutting people out of your life. It's about learning to build inner peace, emotional strength, and a life that feels whole, with or without company. So if you've ever walked away from a visit feeling more empty than when you arrived, stay with me. Sometimes, the truths we resist the most are the ones that set us free. Let's begin with reason number 1. Reason number 1, when your rhythm changes, but theirs doesn't. Retirement brings something no one quite prepares you for. A shift in rhythm so quiet it almost feels invisible, but it changes everything. You go from a life of early alarms, back-to-back meetings, deadlines, and obligations, to open mornings and long, slow afternoons. At first, it feels like a gift. Then, slowly, it begins to feel like a gap, a silence, a space too big to fill on your own. That's what Henry felt. At 68, Henry had just stepped away from a long career in accounting. He lived in a quiet suburb outside Columbus, Ohio. His mornings used to be consumed with emails, spreadsheets, and calls. Now they stretched out with nothing but coffee and the ticking of the kitchen clock. After a few weeks of this new quiet, Henry thought maybe what he needed was connection. Something familiar. So one Thursday morning, he got in his car and drove across town to visit Jerry, an old coworker and lunch buddy for nearly 2 decades. They hadn't seen each other in a while. Henry didn't text or call ahead. He wanted it to feel spontaneous, like the old days. But the moment Jerry opened the door, Henry knew something was different. Jerry was juggling a laptop, a ringing phone, and the cries of a toddler in the background. His grandson, who he now cared for twice a week. His eyes were kind, but distracted. "Wish I had more time, man," he said, apologetically. "You should have let me know you were coming." Henry nodded, smiled, said, "No problem at all," and walked back to his car. He didn't cry. He didn't complain. But as he sat behind the wheel, staring through the windshield, the loneliness hit in a different way. It wasn't about being ignored. It was about no longer fitting. This is something many retirees experience without knowing how to name it. You've slowed down, but the people around you, many of them haven't. They're still working, raising grandkids, helping aging parents, managing schedules and stress. You, in your desire to reconnect, may accidentally walk into the middle of their chaos. A 2021 report from Harvard Health Publishing found that retirees are 3 times more likely to feel emotionally disconnected when trying to socialize with friends or family members who still operate within fast-paced routines. It's not because anyone is wrong. It's simply a mismatch of momentum. Your openness meets their exhaustion. Your free afternoon collides with their to-do list. And slowly, without anyone intending harm, the connection begins to fray. But here's the hope. You can rebuild meaningful connection, not by chasing after others, but by tending to the rhythm of your own life first. You don't need a packed calendar, just gentle structure. Maybe it's a morning ritual, a walk before the world wakes up, a journal entry by the window, a few stretches as sunlight filters through the curtains. Maybe it's volunteering once a week, or joining a book circle, or learning something new just for you. When you live a life that feels grounded and full, you're no longer visiting others to escape emptiness. You're reaching out to share presence, not to fill a void. This is how connection becomes mutual again. Not a rescue mission, but a shared breath between 2 lives that are both standing on solid ground. And if you've ever found yourself like Henry, pulling into a driveway with hope and driving away with silence, know that you're not alone. Your experience is valid. And there. Now that we've looked at how timing and pace can affect connection, let's talk about something even more subtle and more painful. Because sometimes the hardest loneliness happens not when we're alone, but when we're sitting across from someone and still. Let's move into that next. Reason number 2. Surface-level conversation can make you feel even more alone. The truth is, even when the timing is right and your friend has time to see you, the connection you're hoping for might still not arrive. Because not all company is comfort. Not all conversation is connection. And as we age, we start to crave something deeper, something real. Take Carol, for example. She's 72, living in a quiet neighborhood just outside Phoenix. Every Friday for the past 5 years, she's met her old friend Beverly for coffee at the same cafe on Main Street. They've been friends since their kids were toddlers. They've shared birthdays, breakups, even grief. But recently, something has shifted, and Carol feels it more each week. Their chats used to energize her. Now they leave her strangely hollow. The conversations feel predictable. Weather, grandkids, what's on sale at the grocery store. Last week, Carol decided to speak up. Gently, she told Beverly she'd been waking up in the middle of the night, anxious, restless, unsure why. She said the silence in her home had been feeling heavier than usual. Beverly smiled, nodded, and said, "Maybe you just need to stay busy," then quickly changed the subject to her cousin's hip replacement. Carol stirred her coffee, forced a smile, and changed the topic with her. But inside, something small broke. She had shown a piece of herself, and it had been brushed aside. This is a quiet heartbreak many people face in retirement, and few ever say out loud. Because on the outside, everything seems fine. You're not alone. You're sitting across from someone. There's conversation, laughter even. But on the inside, there's still a feeling of being unseen. Studies from the National Institute on Aging have shown that emotional depth in conversation plays a key role in reducing feelings of isolation. In fact, older adults who engage in heartfelt, meaningful exchanges, discussing their fears, their joys, their regrets, report significantly lower levels of depression and anxiety. Shallow talk, on the other hand, can actually increase emotional fatigue. It creates a dissonance. You're connected, but not connected. That kind of disconnection doesn't just make you lonely. Over time, it erodes your trust in relationships. You start to wonder, is it just me? Am I too much? Should I stop trying? And that question is dangerous, because it leads to silence. And silence, when it's born from emotional dismissal, is where the deepest kind of loneliness grows. But please, don't let that become your story. If you've ever felt like Carol, know this. Your need for connection isn't a burden. It's human. You are not too much. You are not asking for too much. You're simply asking for something real. And that is more than okay. The good news is, there are ways to create that kind of connection again. Sometimes it starts with asking a different kind of question. Instead of, "What's new?" try, "What's been on your mind this week?" Instead of filling the silence with headlines or health updates, dare to share something true. It doesn't have to be dramatic, just honest. And sometimes, yes, it means seeking out new friendships, ones where the connection is built on presence, not just history. Joining a small group, attending a reflective workshop, or even starting a gratitude circle at your local library can open new doors. There are people, many people, craving the same depth as you. They're just waiting for someone to go first. Maybe that someone is you. And if that kind of honesty isn't possible with certain people right now, that's okay too. It doesn't mean the relationship has to end. It just means you stop expecting depth from places that can only offer routine. Save your truth for the ones who are ready to hear it. Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling lonelier than when you arrived? If you have, you're not alone. And you're not broken. You're just ready for more. If Carol's story speaks to something in your heart, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Maybe just one sentence about how it made you feel. Because when one person shares, others feel less alone. And if you believe in the kind of connection we're building here, I hope you'll like this video, share it with a friend, and subscribe to Golden Wise Elders. This is a space where your inner world matters, and where you don't have to pretend to be fine. In just a moment, we'll move into the next reason, perhaps the most quietly painful one of all. It's something many retirees experience but rarely admit. The subtle pressure to keep up with the lives of others. If you've ever looked at a friend's busy calendar or picture-perfect trip photos and thought, maybe I'm falling behind, then you'll want to hear what's coming next. Stay with me. You are not alone on this path. Reason number 3, the hidden pressure to keep up with friends. There's a kind of loneliness that doesn't always come from isolation. Sometimes it comes from comparison, from quietly measuring your life against the lives of others and walking away feeling small. This is exactly what Linda began to feel, though she never said it out loud. She's 74, retired for 6 years now, living alone in a quiet neighborhood near Charleston, South Carolina. Most of her days are spent tending to her small garden, cooking simple meals, and watching old movies she used to love. It's a life that's slow, familiar, and most days, peaceful. But every time she met with her old friend Diane, she felt something inside her shift. Diane was always buzzing with activity, trips to Europe, weekend yoga retreats, photos with smiling grandkids at Disneyland. Her calendar was full. Her stories were long. And Linda, though she smiled and listened, began to feel like her own life wasn't enough. She started comparing, started wondering if she was falling behind, started thinking maybe she should be doing more, being more, living louder. But what she didn't realize, what so many of us don't, is that more isn't always better. Sometimes it's just noisier. According to a study published in the Journal of Gerontology, older adults who compare their lifestyles or achievements to those of peers are significantly more likely to report feelings of inadequacy, anxiety, and low life satisfaction, even if their basic needs and health are well cared for. Social comparison, especially in later life, becomes more emotionally charged because the milestones are less clear and the successes less defined. And that's where the danger lies. When we quietly measure our joy against someone else's highlight reel, we often come up short. Not because we lack anything, but because we've forgotten how to see value in the simple, steady rhythm of our own lives. Linda eventually stopped sharing what her days looked like with Diane. She didn't want to sound boring. She stopped inviting her over, afraid her home wasn't nice enough. And slowly, the friendship dimmed. Not because of jealousy or resentment, but because of the silent weight of not feeling enough. If you've ever felt this way, please hear this. You are not behind. Your life is not too quiet. You don't have to travel the world or post photos with smiling grandchildren to have a meaningful existence. Meaning is built in the small moments. In the peaceful morning when the light hits your living room just right. In the soup you make with your hands. In the phone call with someone who truly listens. In the memory of a loved one, honored in silence. You don't have to keep up, you just have to keep true. True to what brings you calm, what brings you joy, what feels right in your body and your soul. If you ever find yourself shrinking your story because it doesn't sound exciting enough, pause, breathe. Remember that quiet lives can be beautiful too. Have you ever looked at a friend's life and wondered if yours somehow fell short? If that question has ever lingered in your heart, you're not alone, and you're not wrong for feeling it. But you do deserve to know. There's no race anymore. There's only your pace, and it is exactly enough. If this spoke to you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What brings you meaning these days? And if this message helps soften something in you, please like this video and share it with someone who might need to hear the same. And now, as we move forward, we'll explore another hidden challenge, one that sneaks up quietly and often goes unrecognized. The emotional triggers that old friendships can unknowingly awaken. Sometimes seeing someone who knew who we were can make us question who we are now. Let's take a closer look. Reason number 4. Old friends can stir up unhealed memories. There's a kind of ache that doesn't come from the present moment. It rises when you step into the past too quickly. And often, that happens through people. Old friends, familiar faces, the ones who knew you back then. Paul, a retired high school principal from Milwaukee, knew this all too well. He's 71, with a calm demeanor and a bookshelf that tells the story of a life once filled with discipline and drive. After retiring, Paul kept a tradition with 2 of his former colleagues. Saturday morning breakfast at their favorite diner. Same table, same coffee, same jokes about old students and snow days. At first, it was comforting. But over time, Paul began to notice something shift inside him. Each conversation, though harmless on the surface, always circled back to who they were during their careers, what they accomplished, who respected them, what decisions they made that shaped the school. But Paul didn't want to be that version of himself anymore. He had quietly started to question whether any of it really mattered, whether his work had left any real impact. Instead of feeling full after those breakfasts, he began to feel hollow, like he was slipping back into a suit that no longer fit. He didn't understand it at first. How could spending time with friends feel heavier than being alone? But the answer was quietly clear. He was visiting the past too often, and each time he did, he came home more uncertain about the present. This is more common than we think. The Yale School of Aging published a study showing that frequent exposure to negative or unresolved memories, especially during retirement, can increase the likelihood of low-grade depression and prolonged emotional instability. The brain, they found, often confuses recall with reality, and when memories are repeated without healing, they don't comfort. They reopen. Old friends mean well, but sometimes they anchor us to a version of ourselves we're trying to outgrow. This doesn't mean you should cut ties. It means you have permission to choose how deeply you revisit who you were. It means you can love someone, but protect your energy around them. It means you're allowed to ask, is this connection keeping me stuck in the past or helping me grow in the present? One powerful step is to practice memory sifting. Sit quietly and bring to mind a moment from your past that often resurfaces. Ask yourself, do I want to carry this into my present? Does this serve who I am now, or only remind me of who I was then? Let go of the stories that leave you questioning your worth. Keep the ones that remind you how far you've come, because you are not your resume. You are not your old nameplate on an office door. You are who you are becoming now, and that's still unfolding. Have you ever walked away from a familiar friend feeling like you stepped back into someone else's story? Someone you used to be, but no longer are? If so, take heart. It means you're growing. It means you're ready to meet yourself here, in this new season, with open hands. If this part of Paul's story touches something in you, I'd love to hear about it. What memory have you been carrying that it might be time to gently set down? And if this video has helped you feel a little less alone, please consider liking it. Leave a comment if something resonated, and share this with someone you love. And if you haven't yet, I invite you to subscribe to Golden Wise Elders, a space for stories, insights, and soul-deep reminders that you're not done growing. Not by a long shot. Now let's take a deep breath and move on to our next chapter. Because sometimes it's not just the people or the memories that wear us down, it's the effort of constantly being on, even when all we really want is something real. Let's talk about emotional fatigue and why some conversations leave you more drained than before. Reason number 5, when small talk feels like a heavy weight. Not all loneliness is cured by company. Sometimes, sitting across from someone, smiling, nodding, pretending you're fully there, can leave you feeling even more alone than if you'd stayed home in silence. That's what Jean felt. She's 75, retired for nearly a decade, and lives in a quiet neighborhood just outside of St. Paul, Minnesota. Every Wednesday, like clockwork, she meets her old friend Barbara at the same cafe downtown. They've been doing this for years, an unspoken tradition. Coffee, muffins, the usual catch-up. But lately, those mornings have left Jean feeling tired. Barbara is full of energy. She talks fast, tells stories, shares updates about neighbors, the weather, her niece's wedding plans, the price of gas, the tomatoes in her garden, but never about how she's really doing. And when Jean once tried to bring it up, her trouble sleeping, a creeping sense of sadness she couldn't quite name, Barbara had smiled, made a joke, and moved on. That moment stuck with Jean. She realized that though they were physically together, emotionally, they were speaking different languages. She was reaching for depth. Barbara was offering rhythm. And the space between those two intentions left Jean feeling emptier than before. According to a recent study from the University of Michigan's Institute for Social Research, seniors who frequently engage in surface-level social interactions without emotional depth report higher levels of fatigue, irritability, and cognitive dissonance. It's not just that the conversation lacks substance. It's that your heart knows it needed something more, something real, and didn't get it. And that unmet emotional need doesn't disappear. It lingers. It shows up as that subtle exhale when you walk back into your house. That heaviness behind your eyes. That quiet thought, why did I even go? But here's the truth. It's not wrong to want more from your connections. It's not too much to crave meaning, vulnerability, and honesty. It's actually a sign of emotional maturity. You've lived enough life to know what matters now. You don't need noise. You need presence. So what can you do? Start by being intentional with your energy. Not every friendship needs to be daily. Not every tradition needs to continue. And not every interaction needs to be preserved just because it's familiar. It's okay to seek out people who meet you where you are now, not just who knew you then. It's okay to ask deeper questions. And if they're not received, it's okay to lovingly step back. Create space in your life for people who listen, not just hear, who pause, who ask, who reflect. Sometimes those people are waiting in community centers, libraries, walking groups, or even right here, in the comment section of a video like this. And if you haven't yet found that kind of connection, don't lose heart. The more honest you are with yourself, the more likely you'll begin to attract what you're really looking for. Have you ever felt socially exhausted after a conversation that never touched the truth? If you have, you're not alone, and you're not wrong to want more. Let us know in the comments if you've ever experienced this kind of emotional fatigue. And if this video is helping you understand your own needs better, please like it, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to Golden Wise Elders, where real talk, real healing, and real community matter. As we approach our final insight in this journey, I invite you to take a slow breath, because sometimes in our efforts to avoid loneliness, we unintentionally avoid something far more powerful, the inner growth that only comes from being with ourselves. Let's explore that together. Reason number 6. Avoiding loneliness may be keeping you from inner growth. Ellen had always been the social one. At 78, she still had the energy of someone 2 decades younger. Her calendar was full. Breakfast with her retired teacher friends on Mondays, afternoon bridge on Wednesdays, dinner with her sister on Fridays, and phone calls sprinkled in between. Her days were rarely silent. But her nights were something else. Every evening, when the house quieted down and the sky turned dark, she felt it. That subtle emptiness, that strange ache that no conversation had fully cured. It came without words. Just a heaviness behind her chest, a tightness in her throat, and instead of sitting with it, she did what she always had, picked up the phone, called someone, made plans, anything to stay in motion. But one night, something shifted. She called 3 people, no one picked up. She sat in her favorite chair, frustrated, phone in hand, heart racing, and for the first time, she didn't try to escape it. She just sat. At first it felt unbearable, but then something else arrived. A calm. A quiet voice inside that had been waiting for years to be heard. This moment of stillness, of not running, is where growth begins. Many of us believe that loneliness is a problem to fix, that if we just stay busy, stay connected, stay surrounded, we'll be okay. But what if that's not true? What if loneliness is actually an invitation, a doorway into the part of yourself you've been too distracted to meet? According to a 2022 study by the University of California Center for Healthy Aging, older adults who spend intentional time alone, journaling, walking without distraction, reflecting, report increased emotional resilience, reduced anxiety, and stronger life satisfaction over time. Not because they were never lonely, but because they stopped fearing the silence long enough to listen to what it was trying to teach them. Stillness doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're ready. Because in the quiet, something sacred happens. You begin to meet the version of yourself that isn't defined by others, not by your job, not by your kids, not even by your friends. Just you, your thoughts, your breath, your body, your truth. And from that place, connection becomes something new. It's no longer desperate, it's not a distraction. It's a gift you offer, not a rescue you seek. So if you've been afraid of being alone, I want to tell you this: there is nothing wrong with you. You are not weak. You are not behind. You are standing at the edge of something powerful. And you don't have to figure it all out today. Just begin. Begin by spending 5 minutes each morning in silence before the world enters. Write something you've never said out loud. Take a walk without headphones. Notice the sky, the trees, your breath. Let your own presence become less unfamiliar, and watch what begins to grow. Have you ever felt like you've been filling your days to avoid facing something deeper? If so, this might be your moment to pause, to listen, to come home to yourself. And if this message speaks to something inside you, I would be honored if you'd share it. Leave a comment below, maybe just one word to describe how you're feeling right now. So here we are. We've walked through 6 reasons why sometimes visiting friends after retirement doesn't ease the loneliness, but deepens it. And none of those reasons were about blame. They were about awareness, about honesty, about growth. We talked about mismatched rhythms, empty conversations, quiet comparisons, unhealed memories, emotional exhaustion, and the sacred space of stillness. But underneath it all, there was one gentle truth. You are not alone in feeling this way. And you are not wrong for wanting more. More meaning, more calm, more connection that feels real. Retirement isn't just a pause in your work life. It's an invitation to pause within yourself. To ask, what do I really need now? What kind of friendships nourish me? What kind of silence teaches me? You don't need to chase after connection. You are already worthy of it. But it begins here. By learning to sit with yourself, not as someone waiting to be fixed, but as someone who's finally ready to be fully met. If this video made you feel seen, heard, or even just a little less alone, I'd love for you to share that. Tell me in the comments, which part of this video touched you the most? Or simply say hello, so I know you're out there too. And if this felt like something worth keeping close, please consider giving it a like, sharing it with someone who might need to hear these words, and subscribing to Golden Wise Elders. This space is for you, your wisdom, your questions, your quiet becoming. And if you'd like to stay connected, make sure to tap the bell so you'll know when the next story arrives, because we're not done growing yet. Not even close. Thank you for being here. Thank you for choosing presence over noise. And thank you for showing up for yourself. We'll see you in the next chapter.